We have Tamora Pierce and Brandon Sanderson here to chat with us in just a little bit, which we're super excited about. But again, just going to pause just a little bit to give again our crowd a moment to gather. All right, so folks are keeping connecting. How are you guys doing? Are you excited for tonight? We're excited to have you.
Oh yeah, I've been looking forward to this for weeks.
Yeah, where are you guys connecting from? Where are you joining us from?
I'm New York State, Syracuse.
Okay, Brandon?
American Fork, Utah.
Very cool. So virtually, I mean, we'd love to have you guys, with us, but this enables us to do a little bit more of a reach, and it's wonderful to see you this way. Okay, so I see most of our folks have connected, so we are going to go ahead and proceed with tonight's event. So thank you everybody for your patience. All right, so hi again, everybody. Welcome to PMP Live, now on Zoom. My name is Michelle, and I'm a bookseller with the Children and Teens Department. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're happy to still bring you politics and prose author events, but from the comfort of your own home. Tonight, we are so excited to have literary giants and fantasy gurus, Tamora Pierce and Brandon Sanderson, with us to discuss their craft. You can purchase any of their titles on our website. We will be posting a link shortly. We are very excited to offer signed book plates from both authors while supplies last. Simply purchase any book by either author and you'll receive a corresponding book plate with the author's signature. Tonight, just letting you know about our platform, you can ask the authors questions by clicking Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote on your favorite questions there. And at the end, we'll have time to go over some together. And as always, please remember this is a creative, safe space, and we ask that folks be respectful of one another in any questions and comments. Now on to tonight's event. It is my pleasure to introduce critically acclaimed authors, Tamora Pierce and Brandon Sanderson. Tammy is a best-selling author of over 18 novels set in the medieval fantasy universe of Tortall. She first made waves with Alana, the first adventure. Her novels often feature strong and believable heroines. Tammy has received the Romantic Times Book Review's Career Achievement Award and the Skylark Edward E. Smith Memorial Award for Imaginative Fiction, among other honors. Her most recent novels are Tempests and Slaughter and Tortall, A Spy's Guide. Tempests and Slaughter follows the adventures of 3 student mages, while the guide is every fan's dream and gives readers a behind-the-scenes tour of Tortall. Brandon is the best-selling author of the Reckoners series. He has created the Cosmere universe in which many of his series take place, including the internationally best-selling Mistborn trilogy and the Stormlight Archive. He was chosen to complete Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series and has received the Romantic Time Reviewer's Choice Award for Best Epic Fantasy twice, among other honors. STARSIGHT is the action-packed sequel to the bestseller Skyward and his most recent sci-fi adventure. We find pilot Spencer once again in search of answers and fighting to save humanity. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the conversation over to Tammy and Brandon. Take it away, guys.
Thank you very much. This is a very different sort of thing. We get offered kind of opportunities by this, Tammy, to reach people that we probably couldn't ever have visited. But it also feels a little impersonal. How have you been dealing with kind of being a writer in the era of COVID and things like this?
It's been a little scattered. It's taken me a while to find my feet again. I'm stuck in the middle of a bad spot with my current book. But the silence, believe it or not, helps. When you go outside, so much uproar isn't there. So I can go out and I can look at my squirrels and my birds and the stray cats and just listen to the quiet. And as far as coping, I have a bunch of projects underway. So taking time off isn't really good for me right now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't really like time off. I like time off from the things that keep me from writing. The nice thing about this, of course, there's lots of lots of things have been terrible. But the nice thing is a lot of things that used to take me away have been canceled.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hard to keep focus on a book if every week you've got something event on the weekend that you're traveling to, and losing a couple days in travel just interrupts the writing process so much.
Yes. Yes, very much so. Before all this happened, I had spent like a year and a half doing a lot of traveling and a lot of appearances. And it's not that I didn't enjoy myself, because I did. And meeting fans is always a happy event for me. But it didn't do my health much good. And I finally had to say, time out, guys. And so I've been building that back up.
I did 3 international trips last year, and
Oh,
at the
man.
end of it, I was just so tired. It's wonderful. I love seeing all these places, right? Like, there are many places I got to go for the first time, and just wonderful. But you get so exhausted of all of that.
Yeah. And part of the exhaustion is your creativity. You start looking at your project and going, this is starting to turn into work.
Yeah.
And that's not the idea.
What do? You said you're kind of stuck in the middle of a project right now. What is your go-to when that happens to you? Do you have something you do?
I introduce new characters. I go back and review what I had before. Mostly I keep ramming my head into it like a bull with a very fiery behind.
Yeah, I often find that adding a character or changing the viewpoint of a few scenes and expanding a character works very well for me in those situations.
Oh yeah, and I use those as well. This is just something that I've been working on it way too long, and I'm not feeling friendly about it. And I keep going over things over and over, which is my least favorite thing in the universe. But I'm starting to slug ahead.
You're very similar to me.
Yeah,
I always keep working on something new. I'm always annoyed when I have to keep working on the other thing. Revisions are my least favorite part.
Oh yeah, same here. Absolutely. I've come up with something that is making me feel vigorous about writing again, and that's just doing brief page, 3 and 4 pages. The client, because I do it to raise money for charity, is they tell them to pick their 2 favorite characters, and I will write a 3-4 page squib of what they're doing.
And you were telling me about this earlier. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. I
helping the process even.
Yeah. But
I would be scared to do that. I would be scared that fans would pick some characters that have no business interacting, and that I would be like, I have no idea what they'd say, because they never would talk to each other. And I worry that I just get into a corner.
I think if it got to that point, I could come up with a door between worlds. But given that I've got all the stuff in the Tortall universe and all the stuff in the Circle universe, I think I can do it. We'll see. It's a whole new thing.
One of the things I've kind of been waiting to ask you, I warned you about this beforehand. I consider myself a little bit an armchair historian of the fantasy genre in general.
Yeah. Yes,
and I've always wanted to ask you your perspective on how fantasy has changed over the years that you've been involved in writing it, both in how it's treated by the community, how publishing is different, how you approach it. Like, what has changed for you across the years?
Well, when I began publishing, there were a handful of women who were writing women heroes. There was Anne McCaffrey, there was Robin McKinley, there was Elizabeth Moon. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody wonderful.
Yeah, Barbara Hamley.
Hamley.
Mm-hmm.
She is a god to me.
She is one of my favorite writers of all time. My very first fantasy novel was Dragon's Bane. It's what hooked me.
That's
still
a good thing. That's a good one to start with. I reread my favorites every couple of years. But when I started, it was like girl heroes, female. There was Marion Zimmer Bradley, but I couldn't get into her worldview. So I wrote what I wanted to read as a kid and ran into an agent and a publisher who had the vision to say, hey, this might turn into something. And so that it's changed so much since then. So many houses have closed. So many good editors and publishers have gone out of the business. But there's also a powerful new wave of writers of color who were virtually non-existent when I started. And also unusual worlds. It isn't the same Dragonlance sort of thing. It isn't the same. I mean, we have cowboys and vampires out there now. So as the industry has changed, the people who write in it, their minds have widened. You're a big contributor to that because when we met, you had a series where it was traditional, I'd say, Napoleonic type era, and yet the female characters were scattered all over different walks of life, and they were strong and they were different. And that
I blame Barbara and Anne for that. My very first fantasy book was Dragon's Bane, like I said, and I went back to the librarian who gave it to me. I said, are there more like this? She took me to the card catalog, and the next book in the card catalog was Dragonflight, right? So I just read every Anne McCaffrey book and Barbara Hamley book I could get my hands on. I moved from them to Dragon Prince by Melanie Ron, and from there to Andre Norton, and just read a ton of these things. And a lot of my understandings of the fantasy genre came from Anne McCaffrey and Barbara Hamley. And I think Anne certainly has a reputation befitting her, but I think Barbara is criminally underread. Was back then and still is. Her wonderful Benjamin January mysteries are just delightful for people who are looking for good kind of period mysteries, detective mysteries, just wonderful books. And people aren't as aware of Barbara Hamley as they should be. And I will continue to thump that particular point over and over.
When I'm asked who my favorite writers are, she's at the top of the list. She also did some brilliant Revolutionary War era pieces as, I'm forgetting the pen name she used, but her detective was Abigail Adams. So here's Sam Adams petting one of her cats. And I was reading it by this person I didn't know. I thought it looked good. And there's something about the way Adams speaks and something about the way Abigail is working and all the cats. And I went, this is Hamley. I know Hamley. This is Hamley. And I tracked it down. And yes, I was really sorry she didn't go further with the Abigail Adams stories. Her portrayals of the founding fathers are brilliant as always, and the mothers. And she's been my literary hero since I started reading her.
You mentioned kind of the worlds of fantasy expanding. I've got this pet theory that is Tolkien doing what he did in the 60s. It really kind of brought fantasy to the forefront, right? The first big epic fantasy, secondary world epic fantasy, and then he didn't write anymore. And I know, for instance, that the David Eddings Belgariad came because Lester Del Rey was actually asking authors, can you write something like Tolkien? Because we just don't have, he passed away. We don't have any more Tolkien. And I think that Tolkien was kind of ahead of his time in some ways. And for years, fantasy was in his shadow kind of rightly, but also it was kind of hard to escape that this big thing had happened. And so because of that, a lot of the writers I read in the 80s and 90s were very deeply Tolkien influenced. Guy Gavriel Kay and Robert Jordan and just, yeah.
You said Guy Gavriel Kay. I'm going to swoon for a minute here. Don't mind me.
I got to have dinner with him. He was so wonderful. I love his works, Taigana. A little bit more content-y than some of our younger readers might want to experience, but it is the all-time great standalone epic fantasy novel. But you know, I feel like it took a long time for us to kind of dig. Certainly, people were doing it all along, right? But for the mainstream fantasy to dig into what Tolkien did, rather than copying his trappings, to actually ask, what did he do to build his world? Can we learn from that?
Yeah. I was just figuring I wanted to read female heroes. And since I couldn't find them, I wrote them for myself. And I was coming in with the authors I mentioned before. And we started making headway in the 80s and 90s. And I was doing something that I just wanted to do for myself. I worked with teenagers. I was getting the mail, and that changed my mind from trying adult. And the power you wield as a writer who has a teenage fan audience is not just intoxicating, but it really inspires you to reach out more.
Yeah, and you have just such an interesting perspective on this. I mean, my wife is a huge Tamora Pierce fangirl, and I have read my share as well. But
I believe I knew that. Thank you.
She is. And I asked her. I said, off the record, I'm not making it on the record, but I asked her off the record, what is your favorite one? And she said, Tempest and Slaughter, like your latest book. And I think that's a really good book too. But to have the actual like hardcore fan say the latest book is my favorite, like that's incredible, right? Like,
usually they want the early ones.
Yeah. Usually they're going to pick Alana or something like that, right? But I think that is a testament to the power of your writing. Like, like, how have you kept all this time? That's one of the things I worry about is burnout, right? Like I've known a lot of writers, like, you know, I like Bob Silverberg's work, but you ask Bob Silverberg, when's the next book? He's like, I don't write them anymore. I'm done. Like, how have you prevented that experience from happening to you? Because I worry it'll happen to me.
I have had a couple run-ins with it lately, but not because I don't like the writing. It's just struggling to have it do what I tell it to. I read a lot. I go to zoos and parks. I deal a lot with animals. I like to go as many places as I can, and I try to do something I haven't done before, even if it's in the same universe. And I want to show a different kind of hero and a different set of problems, and hidden nicely away in everything else. And I go to my enthusiasms. In the 80s, I've discovered David Attenborough on television, and that turned into the Dane books. And so I'm always looking to try something different.
Yeah, I remember reading an interview with you once where you said that crocheting led to the magic, right?
Yeah.
And that's really cool to me, because it's hard for me to point to specific events that caused magics that are world building elements I developed.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. I find that switching projects is basically essential for my process.
Yeah.
when I get done with the book, right now I'm wrapping up the fourth of my Stormlight Archive book, which are big epic fantasies. This one is 460,000 words long. We get away with a lot in epic fantasy, the word
Yes,
count
we do.
wise. But by the time I'm done with that book, I want nothing to do with, you know, that story anymore. I need something really different, because if I don't, I feel like I'm going to burn out.
Well, one of the things I did to get past burnout was to open another universe.
Yeah.
And deal with that. And also each character that I deal with, they have to be dealing with different periods in their lives, and they have to be dealing with something I haven't done to them. So I could have bogged down with Tortall by continuing like Alana. And instead I chose, Alana was who I was when I was 12. And I really wanted to be a warrior, and women's liberation was not quite there yet. And I wanted to stand up and be counted for myself, even if I had to disguise myself to do it. And then that was for me then. The Dane books, I was looking for something that represented me as I was at that point, semi-reclusive animal nut. And then go on to Kel, where I got the idea from a fan of mine who looked like Kel likes, but people were all the time cutting her down and getting after her about her weight and her exercising. See, she does that rock climbing and whitewater rafting. I don't know how much more exercising you can ask a kid to do. So I try to look at the real world and see what I can steal from that.
Man, people ask where I get my ideas, and I'm sometimes embarrassed because they think it's some magical thing, where it's really this. You see the world around you, and someone's problem you listen to them for a long time. You're like, wow, that's like, one of my books started because I had a friend who's a woman who was 6'1", and I had never, because I'm 6'1", never thought that being a woman and being 6'1" would be different. Of course it is, if I just stopped to think about it. But she opened up about some of the issues. And of course, that's not all the character is, but that conflict gets inside you. You're like, wow, if I build a character around, and this is an aspect of that character, it's something that I could never experience, but I can explore it. I have a firsthand account right here to read and tell me what I'm getting right and wrong. Those things are what turn into books. Or I watch a movie a lot of times, and I'm like, they ruined the ending. They were so close, and they got so close to making a great story. I'm going to take this and do it my way, and I'm going to make it completely different. You would never know which story inspired this, but since they failed to do it right, I've got to do it right, because otherwise it won't leave me alone.
Yeah. That's a good way to get at it. It's just, no, you got it all wrong. I'm going to fix it.
And it doesn't even mean that they did it wrong. They just did it the way I wouldn't have done it, which is great. Then both pieces of art can exist in the world and both be great, and they can inspire each other as we kind of react against, so to speak, what's been happening. So,
yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole slew of books coming from this period in time, and it'll be interesting to see what people say. Yeah,
I feel for the editors right now, because they must be getting so many COVID style stories pitched to them.
But see, that you don't need to say COVID. You don't need to cite this leader. You know this, but that's the root. That's where it comes from.
Yeah, and like I would be looking at, like, we're all feeling this kind of weird sense of isolation. And that sense of isolation has changed the way I see the world. And I'm sure that I'm going to be using at some point, this feeling that we're all isolated together. There's got to be some really great stories that can come out of that. Yeah, absolutely. That's a damn good, excuse my French, darn good idea. Go for it. Yeah, writing with children home all the time is also, I'm sure, going to inspire something in me, because, we having the school day where they're away is really handy, and not having that anymore and feeling like you're a bad parent because you're like, all right, go do screens now. Just go do screens. I need to get something done. Something's going to come out of that, I'm pretty sure, as well.
I was at a seminar for gifted kids and their families, and I knew a lot of the people who held it, and they were asking my husband and me why we hadn't had any children. And we were all gone to dinner with my fan friends among the teenagers and the junior kids. And we said we never wanted them. We're happy with things as they are. One of my friends looked around at all the teenagers around us and said, talk about cowards hiding in the middle of a battlefield. But I like teenagers. That's why I was gonna write for adults, but then I started getting the fan mail. And teenagers are a really exciting audience, and they're exciting characters because they've got their whole future ahead. And with ingenuity and craft, there's no telling where those kids or those characters will end up. You never know. So you got to write it out to find out.
I find that teen readers, they both give you more leeway and are more strict with you. They give you more leeway in the places that it's good for creativity. I found that teenage fans don't care what the genre of something is nearly as much, right? It's sometimes harder to pitch to my adult fans. Yes, it's an epic fantasy. They do have guns. That's fine.
Yeah.
You know, Rob McKinley did it all the way back when, and it was fine then. It's still fine now. Kids, teenagers, they don't care. They're like, great, give me a good story. I don't care what genre it is. Hook me on a character. But they'll give you less leeway to be rambly or to, not to beat around the bush, and they'll keep you honest on making sure the character is going to grip them and the story is good. And that combination makes for some really great incentives for writing well.
Yeah, and it gives you great characters too. I write a lot of teenager heroes, so of course I like the characters, but it's how they deal with adversity. I came up from kind of a rotten background, so how characters handle adversity, and especially, I'm gonna come back to your new series, well, duet so far. How she handles herself, your main character, how she handles her peers who don't openly accept her, how she handles her family. It's beautifully done work and authentic teenager. Absolutely wonderful.
I have some good teens that help me out when I forget once in a while what it's like. They keep me honest.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Thank you both for sharing. That was fantastic. I just wanted to hop up here because we do have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, and want to make sure we have some time for those. So we're going to transition viewers over to our Q&A. If you haven't had a chance to ask a question, you can still click on Q&A at the bottom of your screen and type one there. If you do vote on your favorite questions, that will move them to the top of the list. And we're going to go through as many as we have time for. If that works for you guys. Tammy, Brandon, you good?
Okay. Yep.
Good.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. First question is from Drake Amendola. Says both of you have written wonderful romances, love stories between characters who both get to be fully fleshed out characters with their own lives, flaws, and conflicts. What is your favorite of the love stories you've written, and what do you look for in a love story in general?
My favorite would have to be my cop and her goofy mage that she has to work for, from Becca and Farmer from the Becca Cooper books. Because Becca is just so earnest, and Farmer is a total goof until you find out who he really is. They are both people who crept up on each other. And I like it when two people fall for each other without knowing what's happening.
Brandon?
I would say my favorite right now is in the Wax and Wayne books, and it's a spoiler to say, but I won't say who it is exactly, but you'll know if you've read the books. It is something I was very dangerous to do because I introduced what everyone assumed would be the romantic interest, and then convinced you that someone else was better. The person that would not have been first on people's lists, so to speak. At least I convinced a certain percentage of readers. And I like doing that, right? I like showing that real world romance doesn't work like we sometimes assume here's the male lead, here's the female lead. Obviously there will be a romance. And I like stories where the story convinces me, no, those two people will be terrible for each other. Here is who she's going to end up with, someone that actually matches her, or here's who he's going to end up with, someone who he didn't think he needed the things that this person offered, and they didn't think they needed the things he offers. And in the end, the author convinces me that yes, that was the right way to go. Because I think romance happens a lot more that way in real life than these two people are, in the same room, so obviously they must fall in love.
Just quickly, in my Circle of Magic universe, my favorite romantic couple is Lark and Rosethorn because their interaction is so wonderful.
All right.
Characters that play off of each other are just so much fun to write.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next one is from Chris McLean. It says, where do you see your commitment to social justice taking your work in the future? This question is especially true for Tamora Pierce's work and her reflections on them, but also seems to appear in Brandon Sanderson's work as well. And I'm wondering about this as he seems to be writing broader character types. For example, Jasna seems very gay to me as a gay woman. So either go for it.
Brendan?
Yeah, so I try to listen a lot. I think it's a good skill to have as a writer. And particularly in this modern age, I think there's too little listening by people who think they know everything or have it figured out. And I really like it's offered so much opportunity for me to hear voices of people who are very, very interested in hearing, or voices of people who are very interested in informing us, right? And helping someone like me understand someone very different from myself. And my commitment is to do my best to represent voices that feel they have been misrepresented consistently in stories and do it better, right? Hold myself to a better standard. And that's been my goal. And I get that through help from the fans. Anytime they complain, that's useful. Anytime they offer help, you might get recruited. But yeah, that's just really handy.
All right. Tamora, anything to add?
I just listen and read and consider and do my best to show as broad as the expanse of humanity as I can. And I've been lucky enough, nobody's clobbered me yet for it. I do talk to people about what I'm doing. I do talk to people about what they've been through. I follow the news. I follow online because I want to get it right. I got chewed out a couple of times by people who asked why, who said that I'd done wrong with Oka, the female performer in the Becca Cooper books, who's friends. And both times, both writers came back and said, I reread it, and actually, you got it right. So it's a weird thing.
Yeah. All right. Leslie Sterling says, thank you both so much for creating wonderful books. She wants to know, could you both discuss how you develop the unique magic systems in your worlds?
Boy. Okay. The great critic Lionel Trilling said it. An immature artist imitates, the mature artist steals. I am a Wiccan, and I hit the books, and I read everything I could. I started in when I was in my middle grade years with the Norse, and went on to other religions, other magical systems throughout the world, the people who practice them. And I base what I do on real life as much as possible.
All right. Brandon?
So for me, it's different for every system I come up with, and it's hard to trace exactly where. I've written a few essays on this. They're called Sanderson's Laws. So if this question answer asker wants to get more insight, I go into depth there. But basically what I'm looking for is a new way to approach something. And it's a new approach. It's not something actually new. Writing something actually new, I don't know if it's possible. But what every author can do is add their flair to it, their personality to it, and their eyes, the way they see the world. And so when I approach writing magic, I'm asking, a lot of mine are science-based. Science very loosely, like science inspired. It is epic fantasy. I am not writing hard science fiction or hard fantasy. I am writing things that I have a chemistry background. And so being fascinated by things like the fundamental forces, right? I developed a magic system saying, what are the fundamental forces in this fantasy world? If I build up from what the fundamental forces in a fantasy world are, like we have the fundamental forces in science, what would those be and how would that work? So a lot of it is me just kind of looking for new takes on things I haven't done. Interesting visuals. I like magic that does cool things, that on screen is fun to describe, fun to have, interesting, offers me more opportunities as a storyteller. Good limitations tend to offer lots of storytelling opportunities, so I'm always looking for those. Just it's so all over the place, though. It's really hard to answer.
Oh, well, I think that covers some of it. Thank you. All right. Kirsten Schnazarski, sorry if I didn't say that right. It says, hey, you two. So exciting to have two of my all-time favorite authors in the same room. My question is, what part of your process do you think is unique to you? Do you have any kind of ritual or snack or any other part of the writing process that you think nobody else does, no other author does?
I don't know. Moving the cats seems to be a part of a lot of authors' processes, including, I think, Barbara Hambly, because her stories are always, her homes are always bedecked with cats. I don't think I do anything that unique. I read, I listen to music, but then eventually you got to sit down and apply your butt to the chair and the hands to the keyboard.
Maybe it's a little less common for authors. Maybe it's very common. I don't know. I haven't interviewed them on this. I do have two separate distinct writing sessions every day. I'm a night owl, so I get up at 1. I write from 1 to 5. Then I hang out with my family from 5 to 10. Then I go back to work at 10 p.m. and usually work from 10 until 2. And those two separate writing chunks are useful for me. I often describe creativity like the proverbial well, right? Where once you draw the water out, you got to wait for the water to rise again, to seep out from the surrounding stone. And writing for 4 hours is about all I can take. And then giving myself that break and coming back to it fresh really helps. I don't herd cats. I herd macaws, or at least one macaw, which is a little bit different. I have a macaw constantly trying to eat my computer while I'm writing, so that's a little different.
That's fantastic. Tammy, do you organize your time similar with blocks of writing time or no?
No, my basic pattern has been after breakfast, I go to the office, I go through some mail. Round about 11 or so, I start writing and keep it up until 5 or so. I've got a tutelary cat to oversee, and I will take breaks and pet her. But I have music that I want to hear to work to. I have gadgets and statues and pictures tacked all over the place. and I just sort of submerge.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing, both of you, for that. Let's see. Argent has a question for Brandon. He says, how is world building a futuristic society different from world building a magical one?
It's a great question, Argent. I assume you're the Argent I know. So I view story, and perhaps, I don't know if it's a different way, but I view the trappings and the genre of a story very different from one another. And genre, to me, if I'm going to define it, is like a narrow subset of story archetypes of a story archetype. And Skyward, for instance, uses the story archetype is the kid who finds a dragon egg. That I love from Jane Yolen's work when I was younger, but there's lots of them. And I'd like to take story archetypes like that, genre if you want to call them, and transpose them to different trappings. Instead of a boy finding a dragon egg, it's a girl who finds a broken down spaceship, right? I use the same structure for the plot as I would if I were writing that other thing, but I, changed it around. So in many ways, I look at the world building and the structure of the story very as distinct things. So it makes for an interesting question to ask, how would I have done Skyward different if it were a fantasy as opposed to a science fiction? The nice thing I find about science fiction is there are certain things that you can say without explaining that you can build upon more shared knowledge. This gets very hard in fantasy and very tricky. Because while we can't completely expunge it, if you call an Ottoman, there's a subset of audience members will be like, wait. There was an Ottoman Empire in your fantasy world, and they named Ottomans after them. And if you name in science fiction something an Ottoman, it doesn't matter, right? It just works. You can understand what a spaceship is and generally what they're going to do. Whereas in fantasy, the rules are more freeform. Even with magical creations that are commonplace, the structures of what a space fighter has a more shared background. And because of that, it's not cutting corners. It's more like you can build upon that in different ways. And that's the biggest difference I've noticed, is the ability to kind of build upon a shared understanding of what happens when someone gets in a fighter ship cockpit and flies. And then I can build on that and build my own rules to it, but I don't have to build it from scratch.
All right. Cool. Let's see. Allie, Ernest, this is for both of you. What's been the highlight of your writing career so far, and why? So anything that stands out, or a few things that stand out for either of you?
The phone call from Harriet asking me to finish The Wheel of Time is a pretty big highlight for me.
I was talking, I had, I think it was one of the Cal books coming out, and I was talking to people in that Random House about how they could present it and stuff. And the girls from the publicity group were bouncing up and down in their seats. And I sort of looked at them. I said, "What is it, guys?" And they said, "Well, Tammy, First Test just made the #1 on the kit list in the New York Times." And I sat down. There wasn't a chair under me. I was on a little platform thing, but I sat down.
Okay.
And yeah, that was a thing. And then shortly after that, the head of the company came in and was introduced to me, and they told him about the New York Times, and he put his arm around my shoulders and he says, "Let's keep this one."
Neat. All right. Let's see. Alexandra is saying hi from Cape Town, South Africa, where it is currently 2 a.m. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Right?
On my schedule there.
Yeah. Wanted to ask, what is your favorite character in a novel that you've read but you haven't written?
Mine is a whole list of Barbara Hambly's, Sunwolf and Starhawk, Benjamin January and his lady love, Um, let's see. Oh gosh, of course I would go blank right now. But those are some of us. Barbara Hambly, I love Barbara Hambly's way with character. I think she's my main favorite writer, except for Bruce Coville, who is also nutty. And he once almost made me drive off the road into a lake. I was laughing so hard with his rendition of the head monster and the monster of Morley's Manor. I wasn't expecting it, and I just laughed and caught myself just in time.
Well, thank goodness. Brandon?
Javert, probably. Les Mis is my favorite classic, and I like the use of character quite a bit in someone like Javert, just because the villain who doesn't recognize he's a villain is so powerful to me as a storytelling archetype.
And you do it so well.
Well, I really enjoy writing that, and I really enjoy reading that. So Javert has been a big inspiration to me and probably my favorite.
All right, cool. Let's see. This is from India. Thank you so much for doing this. Tamara, you've changed my life since I was little. Brandon, you're an adventure I'll be reading soon. My question is this: when inspired by real cultures, how do you feel secure about the research you've done and know when it's respectful and okay to remix aspects of the culture? So do you both use research in your process?
Oh, yeah. I do a lot of research into cultures, but I always make sure to write outside that culture so I do not inadvertently offend people. I have good editors. I have my assistant, Julie, who also more writes and has a good eye for this sort of thing. My agent, Claire Smith, when I started out, was really great for feedback. And you just go over it and over and over it and over the books and things you see on TV done by the actual people from that culture. Respect is everything to me, and knock on wood, I haven't been called on it except maybe briefly for gay representation, but they changed their mind. But I also don't do the culture precisely. I make it different. I make it my own, inside my own realms, because I really don't want to offend inadvertently.
So this is a conversation that we are having as a society right now that I'm not sure that we've come to where we will be. I don't know where this conversation will necessarily go. There are a certain number of things that I do. I usually am looking for specific individuals and specific instances of things. Like when I'm inspired by the fact that my friend was 6'1", I didn't put her in the book. I took that as inspiration to then take a specific moment and build something out of it. When I was inspired by Subadai, the Mongolian general for Dalinar in the Way of Kings, it's a specific person I'm looking at, and that I think number one is a very helpful thing to be like try to express, looking at how this person interfaced with their culture. You could stray into stereotype, however, and caricature very easily by if you just did that. And because of that, becoming kind of a student of how human beings act, kind of learning history, these are all really helpful things for creating fantasy. But again, I don't know where our conversation will land on this. It is appropriation is one of those things that is a delicate, interesting, and powerful topic to talk about, because one of the kind of flaws that fiction has had in the past is not enough, it's been too homogeneous. But at the same time, we don't want to then make the mistake of drowning out own voices by saying, oh, I can do that too. And so there is there's no easy answers here. Respect, reading widely, making sure that you're having people look at your work so that you're not perpetuating harmful stereotypes. These are very important things to do. Also looking at your process and kind of being aware of where your process is influenced by pop culture representations. One of the places I did this, it's not with race, which you were asking about in the question, but was with autism. I did a very pop culture, somewhat poor representation of an autistic character early in my career, when what I knew of autism came from big budget movies. And as the further I've gone along and the more I've gotten to know people on the autism spectrum, the more I've realized how big the hole in my knowledge was. My response to that was to try to do it better in future books, not to be scared off of having made a mistake. Not to point at those who called me out for making a mistake and say, how dare you, but more say, well, looks like I've got something to learn. I do think as a community, we need to be willing to accept that flawed people are writing flawed books and trying to do their best, and accept that it's okay, authors, to not get so offended when something we did wrong is pointed out. But also community to understand that books are gonna be representations of periods in time and flawed people who are trying to get better.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Let's see. Ziva Silverman says hi to both of you, two of my favorite authors in one place. For Tammy, this is for you. When is Numaire's second book coming out? And then for Brandon, congrats on the success of your Kickstarter. So Tammy, can you share that or?
I'm working on it. I got bogged down and then I had a period of illness and I'm slowly swinging back. I had something very dreadful happen to Aram and it was at a very tense time. And what I was writing, I kept backing up and cutting back. So I need to get him back on track.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We probably have time for just a few more. Let's see. Zachary asks, what are the challenges with writing YA characters compared to writing epic fantasy where the protagonists are normally already in adulthood or close to adulthood?
Well, the thing about my fantasy work is that I am borrowing cultures and times from history. So I have a bit more room to move around and a bit more to work with. And in those times, teenagers were adults. There wasn't a teenage category. So I can have teenagers 14 and 15 being brought into combat as squires. I can have mages of 14 and 15 create an opening from themselves after an earthquake wrapped them up. So things like that. I really like historical settings because of that, where teenagers can be active and have a voice and are learning their way in the world.
For me, one of the things that I worry about the most, that perhaps, I don't know if this is answering the question, but there's a subreddit called Fellow Kids, in which people post screenshots of either older adults trying to write what kids sound like, or often corporate social media accounts trying very hard to be hip and young and cool, and how disingenuous that feels in a lot of cases. And the trick with me is I don't want to fall into the fellow kids category, right? I'm a 45-year-old guy writing teenagers now. And that's challenging in that it could be very easy to stray into, trying to act hip like kids would act. And I wasn't hip when I was a kid, so I didn't even know how to do that back then. And so really just kind of looking at how people authentically experience the world and try to make this person's story as authentic as possible is where I start with every character. And then just having some good readers who can be like, no, Grandpa, that is not how that would look.
All right. This one, let's see, is from Nora. Brandon, your portrayal of Glenn's struggle with depression in Way of Kings struck a chord in me. How do you approach depicting mental health in your work? Do you consult with psychologists or reference materials?
Yes, I do. I read a lot, but mostly primary sources are more valuable to me. Like I go to the DSMV and things like that when I want to make sure that how I'm treating it is not harmful, right? Like that I'm trying to use the most modern, my understanding of most modern treatments and things like that. But really the most important thing is to ask people. I started doing this in my books, not because I wanted to make a theme of it, but because I noticed more and more that the people around me, every one of them seems to struggle with something because we're human beings. This is how we are. We all struggle with something. And in a lot of ways, it's still stigmatized. Anytime you talk to people and they'll read out the percentages of people who take medication for depression, they'll be like, what's wrong with our society that so many people take medication for depression? When my response more and more is, how many people wear glasses? Like 50% of our population needs glasses. Does that mean something's wrong with our population? Or does it mean that finally, for the first time in history, everyone is getting the help they need in order to approach things that are very normal parts of the human condition that we just don't talk about enough? My goal was not to write a hero with depression. My goal was to write a hero, to write a character who is a human being who, like almost every one of us is going to struggle with something. And some aspect of their personality or some aspect of their mind is going to work against them sometimes. And I think that is more natural and more normal than not having that. And so my goal is just to be realistic, to not present a character's struggle as the only thing about them. That's one of the things that that I've read a lot of people being bothered by is, you can't have, it seems sometimes, a character with depression unless the story is about depression. Well, the story is not about depression. It's about a characters, and one of them has depression. Yes, but that's at least my philosophy on it. I have a couple of very dear loved ones who deal with depression as well. And so that's where that came from, me realizing that it feels more and more unrealistic when I read the books and everybody is what we would call psychonormative, when I don't think the psychonormative is normal.
All right, thank you. We have lots of amazing questions here. Thank you, viewers. Unfortunately, we have to wrap it up. So we have time for one more. This is from Joe. What are you reading at the moment? So if either of you would like to share.
I don't remember because I have 5 books in different stages of reading, lying around the house. I am reading The Grand Sophie by Georgette Hare, which is one of my favorite books, one of my favorite writers of Regency romance. Her characters are splendid, and she always cheers me up, especially Sophie, because Sophie has been abroad. She's been caught up in Napoleonic Wars, and she knows who she is and what she's doing.
I'm going to cheat a little and give you 2 answers. One of them's cheeky because I know people tuning into the stream are going to want to know. I am reading the 5th draft of the 4th Stormlight book because I want to give people an update. I will probably finish that this weekend for those who are wondering. It is 161,000 words long right now, or 461,000, sorry, 461,000 words long right now. I'm going to cut off another 1,000 words, but that's about all I can manage. But this book should be coming out in November. In fact, it will be. I'm turning it in this weekend. So for those who are all wondering where that is happening, we'll be posting updates about that and about the crazy Kickstarter we're doing on my social media. The book I'm actually reading is called The Sunken City by Jancy Patterson. She's a good friend of mine and a writing colleague, and this is a pre-publication copy of her books. I just really like her books. She did write it with a co-author, but the co-author's name escapes me right now. I'm so sorry. But yeah, Jancy is one of my favorite writers, and so I got an early copy of one of her new books, and I am reading it.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks for the update on that and also what you're reading. That's about all the time we have tonight, folks. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in and for those great questions. Thank you, Tammy and Brandon, for joining us tonight. Remember, viewers, you can still click the link to purchase any of their awesome titles. You will receive a signed book plate from the author while supplies last when you purchase his or her book. And as an independent bookstore, we are so thankful for support from loyal customers like you. You can check out our website for updated event listings, and you can follow our children and teens department on social media under @KidsandPros. And that about wraps up everything. Thank you both again. Thank you everyone for joining. We hope to see you again soon. Have a good night.
Pleasure. Take care.
You too.